Every year, NAPE holds a lecture in honour of Christian Schiller, HMI. Details of why this is so can be found on the video link in the description below. This year, we were lucky enough to obtain Claire Moloney-Banks, one of the authors of A Curious Curriculum and CEO of the Olympus Academy Trust in Bristol. This lecture helped us to understand how these curriculum guidelines for schools work so well. This is an incredibly useful book with online resources, particularly with the latest DFE benchmarks for enriching the curriculum starting in September. Link below. NAPE thanks the Woodland Academy Trust and Pearswood Primary School, situated in Erith in the London Borough of Bexley, for hosting this event.
I want to start not with curriculum design, not with policy, not with framework, not with accountability, but what I believe is the most important thing, a child. Okay? And I want to start with a child, and I want to start with a child that asks questions. A child that looks at this and says, why is there a road going up the side of a pyramid? A child that says, I thought the pyramids were in the desert. What are all those houses doing there? A child who says, what does the backside of the Sphinx look like? Because we only ever see things from one perspective often. A child who wants to understand how the Eiffel Tower was made and what it looks like from underneath. A child who asks, who took that photograph? And how did they take that photograph? In case you didn't know, that person took that photograph. A child who looks at something like this and has a billion questions. Where is that? Why is a man in a puddle? How deep is that puddle? What's that police officer saying to him? A child that is curious about the world around them. A child that is encouraged and has a curriculum and has a schooling and experiences that develop that excitement and that curiosity. I also want us to think about what we do in education. So those of you who are familiar with this, I want children, even though we give them SATs papers, tests, pixels, whatever we're giving them, papers, can turn around and use their own logic. I love that. I heard someone next to me say it. That's how I know it's 345. He. A child that's not afraid to show that. A child who is not afraid to say that they don't understand something, but can say, sorry, I don't know what ratio means, but here's a happy penguin to make up for it. A child that feels comfortable enough in their environment to be completely at ease with their learning. A child that, despite what we're throwing at them, can use logic and is clever enough to answer the question. Write a command that you might hear in school. Punctuate your answer correctly. Punctuate your answer correctly. So this is what I would like us to start with, a child. And I want to do that because this is what I believe Schiller would have said today. What I believe Schiller would have been curious about. His message, carried through the work of NAPE, still matters today. If we lose curiosity, we lose learning. And here are some of Schiller's 3 ideas. Learning begins in experience. Children learn by doing, by seeing, by making sense of the world. Curiosity is the driver. It doesn't come afterwards when you've done everything else. It's the starting point. It's the hook. And education is moral. It's about forming thoughtful, creative beings. So my question to you throughout this evening is, are we nurturing thinkers, or are we, as adults in this space, managing performance, both ours and our children's? Okay. So NAPE continues this legacy. At its core, it's a powerful belief. Children are not preparing for life, they're living it now. How do we support and encourage children to live life now and to make sense of it? And when we think about what children are exposed to at the moment, and if you think about the pressures on social media, when you think about global citizens, when you think about fake news, when you think about all of the things that our young people are exposed to at the moment at a very young age, how are we as adults balancing that tension between encouraging curiosity but also ensuring and enabling them to be able to think critically rather than pushing them through, managing their performance to get through to a particular outcome at the end of Key Stage 2. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that that isn't important, because I believe that that is really important. But what I'm proposing today is that it's not an and or, we have to do both. Okay. So why does it matter in our curriculum? So new research using brain imaging shows that curiosity is triggered by the brain encountering uncertainty. So they've done some research in America, in Columbia, and the Journal of Neuroscience has published it. And what they say in the neuroscience around this new research is that when we, and particularly children, encounter uncertainty, the brain has to make sense of it. It starts from an evolutionary perspective, because the brain needs to resolve problems, it needs to sort out issues when it comes across something that it's uncertain or it doesn't understand, it has to resolve that. But in humans, it's developed and moved on into being used for creativity. And one of the things that it talks about is it doesn't just help us survive, it helps us create. Curiosity keeps us alive, but it also keeps us human. It keeps us creative, it keeps us imaginative. And this matters enormously for education because it's not a nice extra. The research says it's not a bolt-on, it's not an extra. It's essential to drive learning because it's what keeps children wanting to come back for more, wanting to ask those questions, wanting to find answers. And it's what keeps children, I believe, in your classrooms, in school, and wanting to come back every day. So how do we teach curiosity? How do we protect and grow curiosity? Because the tension is real. And we all know, if you're on social media, that binary tension between knowledge and skills, coverage and depth, and I've got too much, the curriculum's overcrowded, how am I supposed to do this with the accountability measures? And I believe that the answer lies in doing both well, but it lies in the responsibility with us as adults and in our curriculum design. And it lies in us triggering uncertainty by asking ourselves, what do we do in our classrooms every single day that can be done differently that allows us to create that safe uncertainty? How are we creating space for uncertainty? How are we ensuring that we don't move on too quickly? How are we starting with questions? How are we pausing and allowing children proper thinking time to answer those questions? Where in our curriculum are we allowing children to notice, wonder, and explore? Where are we giving them time to make those mistakes? Where are we, in our role, using curiosity to close the knowledge gap through carefully designed curriculum and structure and space? And I suppose one of the things and one of the challenges when I was preparing this was about thinking about curiosity not as confusion. What we're not doing is giving children confusing things for them to look at necessarily. We're asking children we're creating a lexicon for children, to a framework of questioning and giving them permission to be able to ask those questions and think deeply about what's in front of them. The moment a child leans forward and says, I want to know about this, I want to know about that. Ask the child, can't stop talking on the carpet because they're asking the person next to them about whatever provocation you've put out. So when we're talking about adults in this space, how in your structure, in your timing and your planning through lessons, are you slowing down then doing more really quickly because you're getting through those gaps? And I understand that there's pressure and performance challenges, and I understand that you may well be asked to move on really quickly. And obviously there's a balance, but there is a warning when we don't allow for this space of curiosity. And the warning for that is that education becomes mechanical. Education becomes something that children only think happens in that space in the classroom. And we know that learning happens everywhere. And what we want for our young people when they leave our classrooms is to be able to continue that learning on their own, not just because there's an adult in front of them. So what can we do? Where's the opportunities? So this is David. This is reception. And David was asked, well, David found a feather and he drew the feather. And somebody in David's, this is a class where they've been working on curiosity. Somebody in David's class, another child, said, that's really interesting, David, but I think you can do a lot better than that. So David said, you know what, I think I could too. And the little girl who was working with him said, yeah, you're not looking closely enough at that. You really look at that feather, because actually, if you look at that feather, it doesn't really look like that. It looks a bit more like this. So David had another go. And within the space of half an hour, those are David's 2 feathers. Now, that isn't about the child's ability. The one on the left isn't the child's ability. The one on the right isn't necessarily the child's ability. That is about that child knowing and having the opportunity within that space to be able to be challenged, questioned by somebody else in the class, to be able to have another go. Those of you who know Ron Burge's Ethic of Excellence, it's the same principle. Multiple drafts. How do you keep going? And how do you encourage children and give space and time in your class that allows them and develops the culture which allows them to know and have permission to continue to make multiple drafts? The top one is a fly, as you can see. That's year 4. The bottom 4 are year 7. And so we had a conversation in our trust as to whether or not, honestly, any progression in learning had gone on. Because you could argue that some of the ones across the bottom were a little bit more developed, but what additional skills were being taught from year 5, year 6 to get to year 7? And again, this is the multiple drafts. Same principle. Children being given time and space to be, and instruction, being taught. They're not going to learn how to draw by osmosis. They need to be taught, but they need to be given time to practice, that deliberate practice. So, again, the kinds of questions that they were asking. Albie, reception. This isn't his first draft. I'll tell you that now. That's a couple of drafts in. But Alfie encouraged. Well, how many eyes has a spider got? Why has it got so many legs? Why are there hairs on the legs? That was Alfie's first spider. But again, with that questioning, that time, that space, that structure that was put in place by the adults deliberately in the class, in reception, to be able to produce something like that. And I'll finish with these examples with Lillian. Again, this for me is about equity. It's about high expectations for all children. you wouldn't know this from here, but Lillian would hit multiple factors on the vulnerable multibilities spreadsheet. She might be somebody in a class that somebody might just accept the picture on the left, but because of the work and because of equity and because curiosity drives engagement, Lillian was able to persist, develop that resilience and persistence so that she could improve. And what we know from research is that outcomes improve for children who are often less well served by traditional approaches. We developed those outcomes for children by doing something slightly different for them. And what happened for Lillian was, 1, somebody believed in her. 2, she was given time. 3, she was given really, really good explanation and teaching in order to help her look closely. So the first part of our conversation tonight is, where are you, and my challenge to you is, where are you thinking about space in your planning, in your classrooms? Where are you thinking about where you're managing performance? Where are you thinking about how you could raise expectations for young people in front of you? So we developed something. We had lots of questions around this, and we developed a bit of a framework. So I'm going to run through the framework to just put it all into a bit of context. We decided, before actually the curriculum came out in 2018, the OfSTED framework, and that was the previous OfSTED framework that was looking at curriculum, we decided that we actually needed to focus on all types of knowledge. The importance of substantive knowledge. What is the actual knowledge? If I'm a historian, I need to know some stuff about history. Like, I can't do anything, I can't become a historian unless I know some stuff. What is the disciplinary knowledge I need to know? I need to know the characteristics of a historian. I need to understand cause and consequence. I need to understand chronology. Even if I know a load of facts about Henry VIII, if I don't understand what being a historian means, then I can't deliver on those things. I'm just going to be regurgitating facts about Henry VIII. And some politicians might want that, but I don't think that we would be in this room if we only wanted that. We want more than that for our young people. And through the disciplinary knowledge, we focused on 2 elements. We focused on polished products, which I'll show you some examples of, which is that the process of learning is as important as the destination. The journey of how you structure and support young children and older children, because it goes right the way through, to move from those first initial ideas, curiosity, right through to having something that they finish that they're really proud of, how you support them through and how you have the high expectations for that. But also, what are the key learning intentions along that way? How are we going to break up some of those really specific skills around what it means to be a historian or an artist or a geographer? So we break that down across the key stages. And then the interdisciplinary knowledge. So where are we holding on to the concept, the intellectual concept, the big idea of what it is we want them to learn, rather than getting stuck in the weeds right down at the bottom with key facts about Henry VIII or about the Great Fire of London? What is the overarching reason why we're delivering some of this? And then what are the inquiry questions we're going to use to show that we're noticing and wondering and really making sure that children are developing that resilience and that curiosity. So this is our structure. And it starts with the big idea. What's the intellectual concept? If they know nothing else about this, what is it that they're going to take away? And if you can't say that, then everything else really is just stuff that you're teaching. If you don't know the key purpose of why you're teaching that, if you don't understand why that fits in, then you have to question whether or not that those pieces of knowledge that you're trying to teach them, that substantive knowledge, is important. So that's the intellectual concept. It then goes to the top right. What's the knowledge they need to know? What's in the knowledge box? We call this our conceptual knowledge. What is it that they need in order to be able to answer that intellectual concept, that question, that big idea? What are the questions they're going to ask? What are they wondering about? How are we developing appreciative inquiry? How are we developing the skills and the understanding for them to do that? What is in, and we call it a box of entitlement, what is in their box of entitlement, which is about ensuring equality and equity across our schools? And in simple terms of language that is pretty universal, that's around cultural capital. Does one class in a school get a great deal because they're with that teacher and another class not? If you're in a multi-academy trust and you get all of the Year 5 teachers together, do those Year 5 children get a better deal than those Year 5 children? That's the question for me as CEO. How could I don't have triplets, but if I had triplets that were in across a year group, how would I be really happy that they were getting the same deal? So what is the equity around the entitlement that they're getting, whilst also showing how this is relevant to those classes. So local to global is what is relevant to that class, that year group, that school, what is relevant to, we are a locally, geographically local trust, but if you weren't, it wouldn't matter. But what is relevant nationally, and then what is relevant globally? So how do we encourage children to go from the me to understanding about the us to the wider collective global world as one family? And we know that the world is shrinking, and we know that with an increase in hate crime and particularly racist incidents, and I don't want to get really get political, but with some of the things that are coming out locally around flags, I don't know if it's the same here, but where we are, really affecting our young people coming to school and really affecting how they feel about their community and whether they belong. So that's really important. So we do this through educational philosophy, which is agreed across the trust. And what we do with this is we've chosen 5 drivers. Driving scholarly success, lifelong skills and enriching experience, defined. Inspirational learning and powerful knowledge. Confident communicators, because what we always hear from teachers is that children don't have the confidence to be able to speak up, they can't speak articulately. And when you compare some of our children in some of our schools against really high performing schools, one of the really key indicators is their ability to be able to articulate their learning and to be able to say what they've learned, why they've learned it, and how it makes a difference. So how are we encouraging them in developing that? How are we encouraging them to think deeply, be reflective learners, be ready and equipped for the future as global citizens? And this goes across, we're a cross-phase map, so this goes across primary and secondary. So this drives everything we do, and whenever something new comes in or we're looking at changing a curriculum, it always comes back to this. And connected to that, these are primary, as you can see. We have our key learning intentions, which we have for each subject, which state out this is just obviously the substantive knowledge, but state out and break down, this is art, break down what it is as a class teacher you need to teach in the substantive knowledge space. What is it you need to teach in the disciplinary knowledge stage as an artist, and what is it that you need to teach in the interdisciplinary? So where does art meet geography? Where does subjects combine? Because it's now that we define knowledge in subjects. And when children leave, and when you leave here in this room and you go out and you go home, or you go out to talk to friends in a restaurant or wherever, in a club, you wouldn't be talking in subjects. You wouldn't be talking about the Iran war where would this sit in history? Or is it, within geography this sits here. You wouldn't be talking about that. You'd be talking about the concept of the war, the morality of the war, etc. Okay, so and these were written alongside our subject specialists, our secondaries. So this is the framework for teachers in order to be able to do the curious the curious curriculum and the curiosity that we want. We've also cross-referenced it with the Sustainable Development Goals, which are now actually not called that. They're now called just the Development Goals, but they're still the same. If you haven't looked those up, they're great, and there's loads of really useful resources on there as well. And then it finally comes down to, so what does that mean for learning in the classroom? So this is one of the slides that we developed with Mick. He's got 1 billion of these, but it's specifically around where does curriculum and pedagogy collide? Where do they meet? Because when everything comes down to it, the one question that you need to ask in your classrooms is, what do you want them to learn, and what is the best way for them to learn it? That is the one question. And there could be a multitude of answers to that. But if you don't understand what that intellectual concept is and what you want them to learn fundamentally, and you then don't think about how you're going to get them to learn it, the children to learn it, where you're going to develop that. And this was a framework that helped us. So you can see from right down in the far left, what are the small steps, the closely explained instruction that are going to really specifically give the young people the instruction they need? Where are we doing the teacher reveal and the exposition? What's the opportunity for conceptual leaps and intellectual interactive tasks and problem-solving opportunities? And where do they come? Do you start that first? Do you start with a bit of instruction so they've got some knowledge first? Where does that fit? Where do you allow them to be able to exercise? And where do you allow them to be able to practice? And those two being really different. And if you see the example, the opportunity to become familiar with a new concept by following an example is doing an exercise. That's not practice. Practice is when you've already got command of that, and then you are practicing it to get better and quicker. So fluency is a good example. How often do we put children onto fluency exercises when actually they haven't understood they should still be on exercise because they haven't actually really understood it yet? And then, where are we giving children the opportunity to have open-ended, pupil-directed discovery? And my argument would be that you could have a lesson that moved in and out of all of those. You could have a week that moves in and out of those. You could have a term's work that moves in and out of those. And it might be that you weighted more in one than the other. It might be that the lower down the school you are, the more you're weighted in a bit more open-ended work, and further up the school you're weighted a little bit more in some of the towards the sort of teacher exposition, depending on what you want them to learn. But are your teachers cognizant of that? And have they had that conversation around what is it I want them to learn, what's the intellectual concept, and therefore, how am I going to allow that, and how am I going to allow space for that? So I'll just whiz through. So what we then did is we pulled all these resources together, because that was really important for us to have them in one place for our teachers. And you can see some resources that allowed them to be able to pick something up and have it with them in order for them to be able to balance. But what we didn't do was we didn't plan lessons. So on a continuum, and I don't know where you are with this, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but what we chose to do in the curiosity space is we chose to plan the key learning intentions, the intellectual concepts, and this is year 6. So I just whiz through an example for you. So the intellectual concept across the year, whole world in our hands, exploration, law and order, people, places and me. Our terms are organised like that because they go across. Term 6 and term 1 go across. So obviously not in year 6 because they're going to year 7, although the people, places and me starts in year 7 in our secondary schools. But if you were in year 4, if this was in year 4, then year 5 would start with people, places and me, so that you don't have that break in learning progression across the summer holidays. So the year 4 teacher would work with the year 5 teacher on that theme across those 2 terms so that continued. But what is designed explicitly is an intellectual question. So for term 1, how have changes in equality impacted on our lives today? How has exploration affected our understanding of the world today? Should the punishment always fit the crime? Should we have the right to live anywhere? So big concepts, big ideas, opportunities for children to get really into the detail of some big thinking. We then have a set of inquiry questions, and the inquiry questions drive the theme through and drive the learning. And connected to that, this has been designed, co-constructed across, so each year group has co-constructed this with our curriculum lead, with resources, with links, with videos, etc. With, you can't really see them, but with a set of lifter. That was already there, Leah, before I knew that you were coming. So we worked with Lifter to put in, do you do Lifter? No, okay, so Lifter is a fantastic platform. If you are interested in it, Google it and have a look. It is a set of amazing films and resources that are around all over the globe. I think there's 260, 300 or something now, something like that. And they there's assemblies, and they really allow the world to shrink for children who are who potentially wouldn't ever get out and see some of the parts of the world. So those are the links connected to those, and then those are the suggested texts that the Year 6 teachers could use, both fiction and non-fiction, for those themes. And then those are the national curriculum, the substantive knowledge that they need to teach. How they teach that is entirely up to them. When they teach that is entirely up to them. So the idea being that so you can see key component knowledge there and disciplinary knowledge there. So everything connected to the foundation subjects is there, and they then pick and pull and curate that, which allows space for them to be able to develop that curiosity. And because the whole curriculum is designed through the space of curiosity by having the intellectual concepts and by the inquiry questions, what that allows is the very nature of it allows adults to go into that space thinking about what is different and about how you spark curiosity in young children, rather than going for an activity-led curiosity. And I suppose one of the really key messages that I would stress here, and I think sometimes it happens because people are busy and it's a fun thing, is that the curriculum is driven by activities and task-based curiosity rather than woven into the framework of the actual structure of what we're trying to encourage the children to do. So the science experiment that allows children to ask questions rather than actually be woven through and planned in. So I'm going to whiz through three more kind of like structures that I think are important. I'm just going to sort of highlight a few bits connected to this so that you can see what it looks like in practice. So this was actually Year 6, so it was the whole world in their hands, I think it was. It might have been one of the others. Anyway, this was about obviously science-based, but it also connected to art and also into presentation. So you can see the sort of depth, and I'm sure that you've got the same type of quality of work. But for us, this was a real game changer to raise the expectations for our young children to see what they could actually achieve. So these are, I've just put a couple in. Children chose how to display them and present them. You can see there was a bit of a theme because once somebody got a piece of wood, everybody wanted a piece of wood. But then, there we are. We learn from our colleagues, don't we? But you can see the detail and the accuracy, the scientific accuracy. I think one of the things that I have been working on with our staff and been really clear on is I really love creative ways of displaying things. But if you're going to use something creative to display something that is either scientific or is historical, it has to be accurate. Because some of the things that we were having were neither high quality art pieces nor were they historically accurate. So, 30 Roman shields that just looked like they had been printed off a twinkle and coloured in. That's not good enough. So how are we really raising the expectation for our young people? I won't go read through some of those, but you get the picture. How do we think differently about this is a way that children were talking about contours. So a geography, thinking about how they could display them, really practical way of them understanding what contours look like. Thinking again, some geography here, and as you can see over here, this is a colour relief topographical image of the same region on this image. Elevation is representing very, actually I don't think that is that's the bottom one. That's what they've done, the regions of the moon. So I'm going to move on. You get the feeling, you get the impression, high quality, high expectations. So how do we develop that? So one of the things that we've been thinking about and working very hard with teachers on is how do you get children to take ownership of their own learning? And the only way that you can do that is if they see a purpose in it. The only reason they've got a purpose in it is if it's relevant to them. The only reason if it's relevant to them is if they see that there's an audience for it. So what is the audience for the work that the children are doing? Is the audience just you as the teacher? Is the audience maybe once a week they get to take it to the head teacher? Is the audience that they might get to share it with somebody on their table? What's the audience and what's the purpose? Where do children get an opportunity to have something bigger and better and allow themselves the opportunity to be able to publish something that actually then is exhibited? So we have exhibitions twice a year, and sometimes they're in our secondary schools because there's a big space. Sometimes they're in one of our bigger primary. Every year, whatever year group it happens to be, so it might be years 5 and 6, or it might be year 3 and 4, or it might be this year it was years 2 and 3. Each school has a couple of tables, and they bring and exhibit their work and write questions about their work. So they then stand behind their work, and they then we minibus children around, and they come and they then talk about their work, how they've presented it, what they've learnt, the journey and the process. And this started very much with the idea that children, they only wanted to present finished pieces. They only wanted to present polished products. They only wanted to present things that were absolutely top-notch. But gradually over time, what's happened is that we have highlighted and celebrated the journey and the process. So that is now really part of this intrinsic process. And the last 2 exhibitions, we've specifically targeted children. So all children were on the display, but we've deliberately chosen some of our more vulnerable learners, some of our SEND children to come to talk about their learning, to help them with the confidence, and the impact of that has been amazing, and some of our PP children, so that it wasn't the same children always coming who were articulate. It was every child had an opportunity to come and talk about their learning. And what this has done is it's really allowed recognition, it's allowed breadth of learning, and allowed children to study and understand, because they're all doing the same things, how this learning could look different in a different school, in a different classroom. And just some examples of how the children have moved on with some of these things. And you can see it's from art to writing, there's models, and I think later on I've got one which is a design and technology one. So I'm going to move into the sort of last section of this. If we're wanting our children to be really curious and we're saying we want them to ask questions, and we're saying that in order to do that, we need to design our curriculum in that way, and we also need to give them opportunities and space within our planning and our teaching, and we ourselves need to be curious as adults in the planning of that. We're also saying that they need to exhibit their learning. The kind of one of the last few bits is, where are we giving space for the environment to enable that? Where are we thinking about opportunities and designing opportunities for children to be able to touch, feel, pick up, question things? You can't see it very well, but on the left is a tailor's dummy. By the side of it is a old-fashioned suitcase full of material and pins and safety pins and every beads and hats, and every lunchtime children come and dress the tailor's dummy and pin it and change it and design. Because when we really looked at our D&T curriculum, the opportunity for children to actually be totally creative and have an opportunity to just do that was really limited. So that was just one school, one idea, but the children absolutely loved it. And you can see the kind of historic artifacts here. Yeah, you can see just setting up the classroom so that it's really clear that the different types of pencils that you would need, not all just chucked in one pot, but explaining why you would use these different pencils for art. Thinking intentionally in your classroom and your environment about how you organise things. How do you encourage equity in a really creative way? How do you encourage children to be able to see? So we are historians. They're all pictures of historians. The bureau came from lockdown because the head teacher said in assembly something about writing letters, and the children were like, what? What do you mean writing? Like, they'd never, apart from maybe in year 2, they'd written how to write letters. They'd never actually written letters. They'd never received a letter in the post, ever. And their parents didn't, because everything was online. So only a few things that aren't online did they actually receive. So the head said, talked about writing, talked about a bureau. What's a bureau? So went to the local like reclaim yard, managed to find, or may have got it on like Gumtree or something, found one, and then set that up as a writing bureau, and the children would come in again and sit and have the opportunity to write letters, put addresses on, stamp and post them. So again, an opportunity, not necessarily in a curriculum time, but just this drip, 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 drip about the environment and how the environment develops curiosity and encourages thinking. We had, so this comes out of some monitoring visit where I was looking at some geography, and you know, I'm quite good at geography. I could not, as an adult, answer the questions that were being asked of the children because of the resource that had been presented to them, because it was pixelated, it didn't have enough detail. And I said, why are you using this? Why aren't you using an OS map? Why aren't you using what? Oh well, because it was easier. Okay, right. If we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Let's invest in proper maps. Let's invest in OS maps. Let's invest in scale, in size. So the head did a big launch, and to do that, did a big display with all sorts of different types of maps and globes and atlases and everything. And again, very hands-on. The children were able to come over, touch, open them up. So just a few examples. And this was a bit of a mantra for us. Children's thinking is made visible through the school. Every area outlines a learning journey. So everything you put up in your classroom and in your school documents a learning journey for children. They notice it. So what are you putting up? How are you putting up? And how are you creating curiosity within what you put up in your classrooms? And I know Nav well, and I know that this was a real big piece of work for you, wasn't it, around learning environments. So thinking about what does that look like and how do we encourage that? That was the DT display. So as you can see, all sorts of different encouraging children. We don't want 30 the same. We're not going to use a template. That's your task. There's the resources. Go and have a go. If it works, great. Why? Let's unpick that. If it doesn't work, great. Why? Let's unpick that. Really opening up that curiosity for them. So the environment is the third teacher. Curiosity is triggered by uncertainty and by possibility, by noticing something that does not quite make sense yet, but wanting to make sense in the future. So I'm going to finish with this is reception and nursery. I did have loads of videos, but I did not want to chance the IT of being able to show videos. So these are still pictures. But on the right, that is Lego stuck to the bottom of a table. So the children just go underneath and are making underneath and having to make sure that they clicked on properly and designing that. That's obviously a bike wheel with buckets attached, and the challenge is for them to make that spin by putting gravel in to create curiosity for them. I didn't have a picture of it, but Year 5s did something really similar with fans led down and forces and feathers and paper and things as well. So these are mostly reception and what but not all of them. Woodwork and thinking about where we're giving children opportunity to take risks. Where are we? I don't know if any of you saw it, but there was something about Finland and slides. Did any of you see it on social media? No, apparently so. This could be fake news. If it is, then I apologise. But apparently there's a new piece of research that's come out of Finland about play areas. And all they did was they changed the rubber matting from one play area to bark and mud. That's all they did. In 4 weeks, the children's gut biome changed because those children were then exposed to mud and dirt. And what they've deduced from that is really, obviously, it's a small scale, it's 4 weeks. What they were deducing from that is we are creating environments where children aren't taking risks and we're not supporting them. It's a well-being, being able to have a load of fun in a load of mud. Again, balance, proprioception. My daughter is a Pilates, teaches Pilates, and one of the things she does rehabilitation for people that have had strokes or falls. And one of the things she always talks about is that we don't focus about balance. Where are we teaching children about balance? It's not the falling, it's your ability to be able to catch yourself, stop, and it's your ability to be able to know where your body is in space, and where are we encouraging children to do that, and how are we getting them to be curious around that. And I'm going to finish here. The environment offers ambiguity, incompleteness, an invitation, and then curiosity has triggered the brain. When curiosity is triggered, the brain leans in. This is so simple. It's just a sand pit with a piece of cardboard over the top. And so those pouring opportunities for the children with lots of different things just suddenly takes a whole new meaning of them trying to pour through other things. So where do we protect questioning and curiosity? Where can we build on it? How, or do we close it down? And I would then say, let's finish with a child that asks no questions, a child that sits, doesn't want to discover, a child that is very compliant and does what they're told. Can we honestly say that we're doing the best for them and that child is learning and discovering and living the best experience? And I'm going to leave you with that for you to go away and think about. How are we developing thinkers, creators, leaving young people wanting more? And really, how are we allowing them to see things from a different perspective? Thank you. if you are interested in hearing about our journey, there's a code for you to get the book co-written by myself and